take life and cause enormous cost to the health system. Sir, we support this bill.
Dr. Paul Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to speak on the smoke-free environments tobacco plain packaging bill. And while I do believe that Mr. Lees-Galloway had a somewhat one-eyed view of the genesis of this legislation, I do agree with him that the legislation has been long and has been contributed to by many tens of thousands of people over many, many decades. Because I must remind you, Mr. Speaker, that end of Second World War, tobacco smoking had been generally normalised in most Western societies. The troops were given tobacco as a daily ration, and unfortunately it wasn't until the 60s when Sir Richard Dole did his extraordinary epidemiological work that showed beyond doubt that carcinoma of the lung was caused by tobacco smoking. It wasn't until the 1990s, however, that this country really got into making legislation to improve. That's right, the early 1990s, and then later on the Smoke-Free Amendment Bill. No, I absolutely accept that, and I would like to acknowledge Professor Robert Beaglehole, who is the founder of ASH in New Zealand and has been very much the intellectual brains behind a lot of the work done that has required huge amount of effort and energy over a long period of time, and there have been people that have doubted such things as bringing smoke-free transport into New Zealand, smoke-free restaurants, and now indeed we all celebrate that fact. We all celebrate that fact. But the purpose of this legislation is to introduce plain packaging for tobacco products, but particularly the aim is to reduce the tobacco uptake, particularly among young people. As the Honourable Tariana Turia mentioned in her speech, branding can be very appealing in its many forms and sorts to young people, and in fact it can be very appealing to all people. The whole aim of the tobacco companies is to induce that Pavlovian dog reflex whereby the person that sees the brand just can't help but get stuck into the goodies. And the whole idea of this is indeed to help reduce the glamorisation of packaging that the tobacco companies have been just so very happy to use despite the harm tobacco causes. Mr. Speaker, I understand that ACT and Mr. Banks will be one of the few parties not supporting this bill, but might I say to Mr. Banks that, as I understand it, libertarian philosophy would say as much freedom as possible, provided it does no harm. And what we do know is that there are probably 400 to 500 New Zealanders per year that die prematurely because of second-hand smoke. And so I would invite you, I did see you I did hear from you in the Herald today saying that you are very much a supporter of people stopping smoking, and indeed this is yet another piece in the long number of amendments to that initial smoke-free legislation that we believe will contribute to the diminishment of smoking in this country. We're yet to see them, and I would say good on the Australians. Good on the Australians for bringing in the legislation, the first country in the world to do so. The jury's out, but the evidence that we've seen from the early academic papers from Victoria suggest indeed that it is highly effective, Mr. Banks. So keep an open mind and keep your libertarian philosophy high. Mr. Speaker, there is no I would say that that the record and the contribution of the national government in this area is absolutely beyond doubt. We've increased the excise on tobacco products year after year, the area that we know is most effective. We've banned smoking in prisons and the display of tobacco products at the point of sale, and we have seen a big increase in the uptake of government subsidised nicotine replacement therapy. We've set the health target to quit smoking in hospitalised patients 95% by 2014, and it's already been achieved. We've now got the target out there in the community for general practitioners to get all their smoking patients, given them advice, and now working on a target for pregnant women. So that too has to be extraordinarily good. And I must acknowledge the Maori Affairs Select Committee and their tremendous effort when they suggested Aotearoa should become smoke-free by 2025. This has been indeed taken up by the national government, another example of where we indeed have shown our absolute commitment to reducing the harm from smoking. We're making sure time-bound targets are flexible, realistic and cost-effective. Mr. Speaker, I was interested to see that the tobacco companies are still able to have their names or individual brands on the packages, but with very tight controls. And hence the controversy in Australia. Good on the Aussies. Unfortunately, it has bitten them in terms of the way that they have now are embroiled in a very difficult court case through those countries that are producing tobacco, and of course the tobacco companies who are doing everything they can in the third world to encourage and promote smoking, very much against the public health in those countries. But Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt in my mind that while we do not know exactly when this legislation will be enacted, that there is the majority of the Parliament that is very much for it, but the issues around the World Trade Organization are issues around that every country has the right or the sovereign right to protect the health of its people. And I don't believe the problem is so much about free trade and the World Trade Organization. I believe it's much more about scurrilous tobacco companies colluding with tobacco producing countries to bring in expensive delaying court action. The issues regarding the TPP, we have clearly signalled that legislation will come through this Parliament. We have clearly signalled that we will not compromise our sovereign right to protect the public health of our people. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is another step in protecting the public health from the proven harms of tobacco, and I commend it to the House.
Honourable Annette King.
Mr. Speaker, it is such a shame that